Welcome once again to the Sage, and thank you. Thank you for the many Sage shows you have been a faithful audience. Thank you for sharing our journey. And particularly today, we want to thank you ahead for knowing you will be part of our next few shows on which we're going to focus on something extremely important for our nation, for our country, for us as a people. A few months ago, I would say about 7-8 months ago, on the Sage, we put out a call of action in which we called on our fellow Nigerians to come together, to again review our reality and recognize certain fundamental truths about ourselves. We asked you to reawaken to the fact that we are a great nation, that we are a great people, that we have been amply endowed with resources of every type, that it is real, it is our reality, and that millions and millions of us in this country are good people, that millions of us have worked, giving our lives, the better part of our lives, in making our Nigeria a country that should be worth living in. And we called and asked that those are many of us who constitute that silent majority need to reawaken and claim what is truly ours. We are endowed. The good Lord has blessed this country abundantly. If it's anything else, it's because we haven't claimed the God-given gifts we've been given. We asked that we rise up and take over our country as we should. We talked about the fact that silence is compliance to negativity. That majority of good people can no longer afford to keep quiet. And that this particular time in our history affords a unique opportunity for us to do what needs to be done, to reclaim our positive reality, to use the forthcoming national election as a starting point to recreate our future and make it what it should be for us and for our children to come. When we put out that call of action 8 months ago, it seemed like a wish, a dream. And yet, today, I personally believe we're beginning to see it come alive. In that call of action, we asked the millions of our young people who form close to 70 to 80% of the population of this country to take it in their stride, to claim the future that is theirs, and to recognize the fact that if things in 2023 are going to be better, it is them, the millions of young people who have the power to make a difference. And so in the next few episodes of The Sage, we look back and we feel specially privileged to discuss with some Nigerians, some whom we often make term as that silent positive majority, who have, despite the seemingly overwhelming odds and obstacles in our past, have continued to believe in our great country and have done their bit in whatever way they could to forward, to aid, to bring to reality that greatness. We showcase them, but there are many that we can never bring on the set to you. We are just touching a few. As a reminder to all of us that many of us have worked, many of us have continued to believe in a great Nigeria. And this is the time to remind us of that. And this is the time for all of us to join together, to work together, to make and claim the reality that is ours. As the discoverer on this our journey together, I have been able to reach out to a few, and I thank them for agreeing to come on set and talk to you. But there are many more out there who deserve to be here discussing their role, their part, who of necessity we will not be able to feature. But to our audience, may I also please humbly request that if there are others who you think deserve, that we need to bring on set to discuss and talk as an inspiration to all of us, please do reach out and contact us and suggest such persons, such names. We shall be very, very pleased to invite them to the show. And so having said that, I am delighted, absolutely delighted, to present my first guests on this series to you. But stay with us. When we come back, I will unveil the package. Thank you. Welcome back to The Sage, and thank you so much for remaining with us. My very first guest on The Sage gives me a great deal of pleasure. It's a guest that is not a stranger to The Sage. Indeed, he's featured before in a slightly different capacity. And yet, as I was thinking about people to ask, distinguished people to ask, to come discuss with us, I thought he fitted that category to perfection. And on top of that, he's young. He's a remarkable young man who in his short lifespan, at least his lifespan is short to me from where my vantage point as somebody who is a mom to him, has done a great deal. And therefore, in every way, qualifies to come here and sit here and tell us what has driven him and why he's so committed to this concept of a wonderful Nigeria, a great Nigeria. I have on set with me today no other than Dike Chukwumerije. Dike, you're welcome to The Sage.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be back on the side. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. You are an incredibly busy young man, a gifted, talented young man, but you always grace us, bless us by doing everything in your capacity to honor our invitations. And so thank you. I don't take it lightly. We don't take it lightly. The audience don't take it lightly. Thank you for being here. And thank you for the discussion, which is going to happen because you're a young man who is passionate and you speak your heart and you speak your truth. So welcome.
Thank you.
But before we go on to the discussion, let me do you justice and my audience justice by introducing you properly. Dike, as we all know, is a household name in Nigeria. But our audience is not just Nigeria. We on The Sage are proud of the fact that we do have a large international audience as well. And so for them as well, I will read your CV a little before we start the discussion.
Thank you.
Dike Chukwumerije is a Nigerian spoken word and performance poetry artist and an award-winning author. He has, in fact, published 8 books. Many of them have won awards in their own right. Dike was cited as one of the top 100 most influential Africans by the New African magazine way back in 2016. Dike is a member of the Abuja Literary Society and the host of the group's book jam and poetry slam. He has won several poetry grand slams in Nigeria, including the maiden edition of the African Poets Nigeria Grand Slam competition. He is one of Nigeria's most prolific performance poets, with 3 successful performance poetry videos and a live poetry show, which has run for many years. At TEDx Maitama in September 2017, and at the 23rd Nigeria Economic Summit in October 2017, Dike's rendition of his poem, The Wall and the Bridge, attracted widespread public attention to his message of the need for a national rebirth, a reawakening of social consciousness. At the platform on May 1, 2018, Nigeria's Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, recites Dike's poem, The Revolution Has No Tribe, during his remark on how young Nigerians are shaping the future and should shape the future. Dike Chukwumerije reminds us, he said, in his powerful poem, The Revolution Has No Tribe, that our destinies as Nigerians, no matter our tribe or religion, are tied together. What affects one affects all. Suffering knows neither tribe nor tongue. In November 15, 2018, he was a speaker alongside the Nobel laureate Wole Soyinka at the 5th Lafarge Africa National Literary Competition in Lagos to challenge leaders to do more about Nigeria's literature gap. His shows are now among the most anticipated events in Abuja, creatively fusing entertainment and a call for reawakening of national consciousness. Dike, this resounding end of your citation proves beyond doubt that you do indeed exemplify the kind of people we're bringing on set in the next few episodes, who, long before the rest of us perhaps woke up, had seen it in your mind, in your vision, in your dreams, in your passion, that we needed a reawakening. It is only when you are reawake that you live and claim the reality that is yours. So once again, thank you for being on set, and thank you for honoring our invitation.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to be here. Always.
Dike, I'm going to ask you what led to this vision, mission in your mind. For many of us, many things triggers our journey in life. Permit me, even before you speak, to say that for me, you're a kindred spirit. Mine began perhaps before you were born, many years ago, when as a little child, a young teenager, I represented this country in an international forum in the US. And my young mind woke up to the fact that I had every reason to be proud to be a Nigerian, and never forgot the 3 months I spent outside representing this country triggered a deep and lasting patriotism in my mind. For me, I usually cite that as the beginning of my own journey. What began yours?
Mine began in the cosmopolitan city of Lagos, where I was born. and raised. And I was raised by parents that never really articulated an ethno-regional point of view. I was raised in a household, in a very Pan-Africanist household. My father was a committed Pan-Africanist. And I was raised in a house that had life-size paintings and portraits of people like Kwame Nkrumah, Che Guevara, and surrounded by books that spoke about Africa and African history. And I think children absorb. I wasn't told anything, but that energy that was created growing up, you sort of absorb it, you know. And I grew up in this community where there were people from all parts of the country. And I made friends with them, and those friendships were very defining and character forming. I was surrounded, I had the privilege, the blessing of having my character shaped at a young age by people from different parts and different religion. So I owe a huge part of who I am to people that didn't come from my tribe or didn't come from my religion. And I can't change that about myself. You know, a lot of my memories, my most precious memories, are buried in parts of the country that I'm not indigenous to by the conventional narrative. But it's almost like having your umbilical cord tied to certain places. And then there is this narrative that is artificially trying to cut that cord and saying, well, because you don't come from there, you can't draw meaning, you can't draw life, you can't draw vitality from these people or these parts of the country. So I was privileged to have been raised in Nigeria. Maybe my parents didn't do it intentionally, but that was the ecosystem in which I was raised. And by the time I came of age and began to confront or meet certain attitudes, I just found that my instinctive, my intuitive, my natural response to certain things was, no, I don't understand this. This doesn't resonate with me. Mm-hmm. I just have a bigger view. I am very aware of our shared humanity, not just within the Nigerian ecosystem, but across West Africa, as a Black person in the world where Black people are at the bottom. I am very strongly aware of the need for solidarity across ethnic, across religious, across national borders to help pull up, this segment of humanity. There's no reason why we should, humanity should have one wing tipped downwards. There's no reason why one segment of this population should be permanently at the bottom.
Equality seems the natural, the most natural state of being.
Yes.
Equality across everything.
Across borders. So when you grow up listening to Maria Makeba, names like Patrice Lumumba are natural to you, things like that. You come to the table with a wider perspective. Than someone who, because I believe that your upbringing shapes you very strongly.
Yes, definitely.
So if you're born in Onitsha, you grow up in Onitsha, and there's a way you're going to look at the world. It will take you a while to realize that the world does not revolve around Onitsha. It takes a while. But if from a young age you're exposed, you don't have to travel. Books were my first airplanes. I was surrounded by books.
That's an interesting analogy.
Yeah, I didn't leave this country till I was in my late teens, and it was to Cotonou. So I didn't travel to the West until I had graduated from university. But books were my first aeroplanes, and I was surrounded by them. And they talked about other cultures, other peoples. So you begin to realize that when you read and you get into the mindset of somebody else. That's why, even till now, I'm a great advocate for books, because they help you see the world through the eyes of other people. And the moment you can empathize with someone, you can't hate them. You can't hate somebody you understand. So I was really blessed and fortunate to have been raised in an ecosystem like that, where my mind traveled early in life and encountered other cultures. Where when I went out to go to school, I was born we're living in Shomolu. By the time you're going to the island and you get on the bus and you hear different languages and you meet different people and you make friends. My best friend, my first best friend was from Delta, what is today Delta. By the time I got to secondary school, then my next best friend was from Ogun State, and then the next one was from Bauchi. And this is before you even have the concept of tribalism and ethnicity. You've already made friends with people that have stamped their personality on your heart. So I carry these people with me. I remember at some point I left my parents' home and I lived with a couple, from Delta, so it's that mix, and I can never, it's who I am. I owe my faith, my hope, my optimism, my talent, my skill, my outlook to all these people that helped to shape me. And to become tribalistic would be to deny my own personal heritage, which I cannot.
Dike, that's beautiful, and I understand that. And as I look back too, I can see many similarities. But let me say, so that has positioned you sort of to love people, to not really see any difference between you and others and many others because of issues of tribe and so on. But how does it lead to a love of country? Can you move a step further?
Yes.
I mean, how did you now evolve into somebody? So it's not just about bonami, happily getting on with people. How did it translate to patriotism, to a love and a belief in a Nigeria, and a great one at that?
I'm one of those who I'm very acutely aware of how much I owe this country. You see, an education is the greatest thing that you can give to a person, a solid education. And Nigeria gave me an education almost for free. An education that allows me today to stand shoulder to shoulder with anybody from anywhere in the world. I went to a federal government college, King's College in Lagos. I went to the University of Abuja. My parents didn't pay much compared to what we have to pay today to send our children to private schools. And in these institutions, my mind was shaped and I was given the gift of free and independent thought. I'm one of those people that are very proud of my Nigerian education. I remember in my JS1, it was my drama teacher, Ms. Ngurube, that helped me discover the fact that I had a flair for the dramatic and for writing what today I recognize as performance poetry or stage poetry. As a 10-year-old in King's College, she helped me discover that. And so many other teachers through the years that exposed me to this thing. So I owe that to my country. I owe the fact that I have this confident, can-do spirit as a Black person. I don't come into the world community with a chip on my shoulder. I'm very proud of my Africanness. Nigerians are one of the few African nationalities that are not easily intimidated by the white skin or the Western.
Absolutely.
We come with that confidence. We can be respectful, but the moment we sense disrespect on the ground of race, we react to it very strongly because it goes against our grain as Nigerians. It's a confidence that this country, that came out of this. And these are things that are very strong components of my character today. So I come with gratitude and a recognition that I'm this powerful because of where I'm coming from. But in terms of consciously recognizing that, look, I love my country, it's a combination of a natural organic thing that comes out of all these experiences I've talked about. As a youth, or my early 20s, I traveled. You know, I'm an Igbo boy born in Lagos, who every Christmas would go home, would make that long journey from Lagos across the Niger Bridge to the village. And you absorb the journeys, the stories along that journey. In my late teens, I came to the north. I moved to Abuja and became exposed to this path that as a southerner, I had never known. And I also began to travel. I would go from Abuja to Jos, to Kaduna. My best friend in university was from southern Kaduna. I'll go visit him. And all these journeys, you begin to be exposed to the geography of this land. You see how it changes from the tropical rainforest in my village, where you wake up in the morning and you see the palm trees. And then you see the rocks in the southwest. You see the plains in the middle belt. You see the desert conditions. By the time I got to places like Maiduguri. And being somebody who loves nature and appreciates it, I began to fall in love with the geography of my nation and with the people and with the language. So there's that natural sentimental connection that I have with my motherland. But then on top of that, I started realizing that, look, I spent 4 years in the UK. So a bit like your experience, when you go out there and you really realize that I have nowhere else that is truly home, apart from where I'm coming from. And this country I have come to with its clean streets and will never really accept me as an equal. It might take 3-4 generations. My children and my children's children will have to struggle for equality here. But the people of this country, their own young people in generations past, had nowhere to go. So they stayed and they struggled and built this country into a place where I want to come to now. But who is doing this for my own country? If I'm here struggling for equality, struggling to make this country even better than it is, who is doing it for my country? And I realized that Nigeria was like an orphan, and there was nobody really taking care of Nigeria. There were people taking care of Ndi Igbo. There were people who are passionate about Hausa, Yoruba, but Nigeria was an orphan. There was nobody that said, I will care for you like you are my own mother or you are my own parent. And I felt responsible. I felt like I belonged to a generation that could truly say that you are my mother. You know, I can understand if the generations past cannot say it in all honesty or struggle to say it in all honesty, having been shaped in sort of a different climate. But for me...
Dike, let me stop you there and say that while agreeing with many of the things you've said and they resonate with me, let me just say, again, as that older generation you're talking about, that actually no, the things that are spurring you on now are the things that moved us in our day. I can assure you that people like our nationalists, the first ones, Obafemi Awolowo, Nnamdi Azikiwe, and so on and so forth, were actually echoing those very sentiments. You go back to those roots. They saw a great Nigeria. They saw a one Nigeria. They fought for independence, believing in that potential. And many of us who are parents now for you enjoyed exactly what you said. And that is something Nigerians need to begin to look back, understand, and appreciate. This country gifted us with the best education possible. Yes, I talked about going to represent this country abroad, but because of the education I got here and won a national essay competition because the schools were good.
Yeah.
We benefited from that tutoring. And a young teenager found that when she got to the US, could stand head and shoulders and even above my contemporaries from 30 other countries in the world. Nigeria gifted us. I think somewhere along the line, something got missing.
Yeah.
and something that is affecting a lot of our young people today.
Yeah.
Something got missing. We forgot to see the beauty of Nigeria, the good of Nigeria. You've described beauty in terms of landscapes and so on, so poetically, so beautifully, and it is true, but also to be appreciative of the gifts of this great country is something that we have a long way to go.
Yeah, absolutely. I think along the line, we became disillusioned with the state, with the government, and began to conflate the two, the nation and the state. And they are two different things. The nation is different from the state. But people conflate it, and the frustration they feel with an inefficient, a corrupt, a bureaucratic, nepotistic, tribalistic state, they take it out on the nation. And one of the greatest evolutions I had was to separate the two, to realize that Nigeria is not the same as the head of state, the minister, that I can see my country separate from the government apparatus and appreciate it.
See my country separate,
yes,
from the government and leadership that may not be right.
Yeah.
They do not form the country.
They do not.
We, the totality of citizens, form the country.
I have as much right. Nigeria, I have as much right to define Nigeria as the head of state has. He doesn't have more right than he's a citizen just like I am. So somebody that is defining Nigeria can define it by me, not just how the head of state behaves. Well, how about me? How about the hundreds of millions of Nigerians who get up every day, put their head down, do what they're supposed to do, take care of their children, look after their neighbors, who don't act in a tribalistic way, but whose voices, whose stories are lost because the other stories are more sensational. What gives them or politicians, what gives them more leverage in terms of defining what a nation is? I don't even believe that it is the calling of politicians to define a nation. I believe that it is the calling of citizens, that it is the people who define a nation, not their politicians, particularly the artists, because a nation is a story. It's a narrative.
A nation is a story.
It's a story
that will continually be written. It's not cast in stone.
It's not cast in stone.
It changes.
It changes.
With evolution
yes.
and with time.
It's how you tell the story, of Nigeria. You can choose to start in 1914. You can choose to start, because to me, Nigeria is older than that. You can choose to say, some white man came from Britain and just coupled us together. Or you can choose to see it as a destiny, a nation that was fated to happen. And this man just happened to be the channel through which it happened, because God moves in mysterious ways. But a nation was destined, a great nation was destined to arise here at the confluence of the Niger and the Benue. It's written in stone. It just happened to be that historical reality expressed itself through Lugard. So a nation is how you tell that story. You understand? It's how you tell it. And
I will, again, button here, because we're going to have to take a break and re-emphasize these your last words. A nation is how you tell the story. Nigeria is how we tell the story. It is positive, and we need to see it is positive and tell a positive story, because that is the only way our story becomes a living day-to-day reality. There are millions of us. We define the country. Nobody else can. And I will butt in personally and say that I actually believe we were predestined to be. I agree with you.
Yeah.
Nigeria is not an accident
No.
of nature.
No.
Nigeria, it came out in my call of action, in which I said that I believed that the day the good Lord created this country, he was in an extremely good mood. And so he blessed it with abundant resources. What we are not capitalizing on, which is our diversity, is actually a huge potential
Absolutely.
for progress.
Absolutely.
It is an opportunity.
Absolutely.
So no, the colonial masters, if we may still use that term, were just part of nature, an accident of nature that helped to make this great country, into what it is today. But it is for us, those of us who are this country, to ensure that our reality, our positive reality, comes into being, and that the vast majority of us live it.
Absolutely.
Stay with us. We'll be back next week as we continue this amazing discussion with Dike, and actually then move on to discussing how do we manifest, how do we make the positive reality that is ours, particularly at this time in our history, how do we come together to make it possible? Dike, thank you once again. Be patient with us and be with us next week as we continue this discussion. Thank you to our audience. See you next week. Don't go away. Thank you. Welcome once again to the stage, and thank you for being with us. Last week, we started a discussion with a very, very amazing young person, our guest, Dike Chukwumerije, in which we talked about the things that have shaped him to be what he is. One of the best known nationalists we have, a young man with a passion for this country, who through thick and thin, even during our darkest moments, has continued to believe in us as a country, in us as a great country, in us as one, detribalized, each of us wanting the best for this country. And so last week, Dike talked about the things that shaped him to be what he is. And this week, we promised you that we were going to delve further into that discussion. We are now here in our today. How should we all move forward together, Dike, to make our positive reality a living reality, if I may use the word?
Thank you for the question. I really appreciate it. And I think that there are many practical steps that we need to begin to take. I believe that the greatest, or to use the term, Nigeria's original sin is tribalism. Is the fact that historically we've been unable to overcome the limitations of tribalism, particularly when it comes to decision making in the political sphere. We're just unable to assess people on their merit. We constantly assess people on the basis of the ethnic or religious groups they belong to. And it makes us make suboptimal decisions when it comes to who represents us as a government. And as young people, we need to begin to rise above this. Because politicians, being people who essentially want power, know our pressure points. They know our things that trigger people to sort of retreat back into that ethno-regional herd mentality. So we know that if we start talking about Biafra to Igbo people, their blood will rise. We know that if we begin to talk about the Sharia or January 15 in the north, you're going to get a reaction. Politicians know this and they push those buttons in order to discourage people from individual thinking. Thinking is being able to assess somebody and look, this person, are they the best person for this office? And when somebody wants you to stop thinking like that and instead start thinking like, look, you are an Igbo person, look at him like an Igbo person, or look at him like a Yoruba person, or come on, look at him like an Hausa person. They begin to throw these issues, you know? And we have to become resistant to this way of thinking. And so for young people, I always advocate that one, learn the history, not the propaganda. Learn really what happened in our past, where are we coming from? Two, make a decision to forgive. Make a conscious decision to forgive and let go. We cannot keep sacrificing our present to pay for our past. We must use our present to pursue our future. Make a decision to let bygones be bygones. From here, let's go forward. Number three, we must relearn. We must find new ways of talking to each other. We must begin to, you see, in our history, in our education, we're programmed to see difference, different language, different religion, what about the things that we share in common? We are blind to those things because that's not how we're raised. So begin to look and see how much you have in common with that person from the other tribe. It may be the fact that you both went to the same school. You both have the same experience of coming out and looking for a job and not finding it. You both have the NYSC experience. You both know how it is to not have light in your house, not have water. You both know what it's like to want to travel and your heart is in your mouth because you don't know if you're going to get safely to the next city, if you're going to be robbed, or you're going to have an accident. You both know the anxiety of, a parent or a sibling is ill and you're not sure whether the hospital will be on strike and these are things that we share in common. Some of the things, we share food, we share music, we share fashion, we share movies, we share football, we share so much in common. Learn to use that language, learn to use these things and begin to create a language that allows all of us to be aware of this shared reality. And then we need to begin to organize on the basis of our shared interest, as opposed to our historical differences. As Nigerians, we want a better life. We want to be able to live in a country where when you travel and you bring out that passport, you do it with pride.
That green passport.
That green passport, you do it with pride. I want my children to know the pride of being a Nigerian. I want to live in a country where education is qualitative and accessible. Healthcare, I always tell people that Nelson Mandela died in a hospital a few streets down from his house. You know, for us, when we face that, we are flying our parents from India to Germany, dragging people around in their last months from country to country. It's so dehumanizing. I want to live in a country where if my father says he wants to die in the village, there is a good hospital there where he can die in a place that is familiar to him, amongst people that are familiar to him, and live his last days in dignity. These are things that if I talk to my counterparts in Borno, in Kaduna, in Kano, and we talk about these things, all of us will say, yes, I agree.
Dike, let me stop you. Not because what you've said is pregnant in depth and richness. And so sometimes I stop and recap a few of it. You've talked about the fact that we need to know our history, really, as much as, if possible, an unbiased history. A history, about where we came from, and therefore which allows us to know where we're going. You talked about de-learning some negative things, which is the way we've been manipulated, perhaps, if I may use that strong word, into seeing differences all the time. And so we respond to these triggers that stir up those differences. You talked about learning to see our similarities, our commonalities. Indeed, in English, I believe it's called empathy. Absolutely. It is when you see how somebody is like you that you're able to empathize and sympathize. You've also stressed the fact that our similarities are actually more in number.
Yeah.
And therefore, there are many beautiful similarities to be seen. Our needs, our shared ownership of this country, our basic needs for human survival, and so on and so forth. And that we then begin to learn to see the similarities and to recognize, if I may go further and say that we're indeed brothers and sisters.
We are. Absolutely.
Doesn't matter from where you come.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So those are attitudinal and conceptual thoughts and thinking. I'm going to ask you to come down a bit further and tell us in practical terms, what does that mean? If you say, know your history, how does one do it? If textbooks are not written, if people are so willing to tell different versions of the same story, how can one critically know your history? If you say, don't respond to those triggers, how does one learn not to do so? And if you say, see your commonalities, how? Again, I'm going to ask you, how? What are your suggestions towards that?
So for instance, with learning history, learn to read or listen. There are alternative versions of history. Every side has its version. Learn to listen to every side with an open heart. Don't take it for granted that what your father and mother told you is the truth.
It is the way they saw it.
It's the way they saw it. Somebody, for instance, I'm an Igbo person, and I get this a lot. Somebody will say, my father told me that during the war, such and such happened. Many times, your father may have been in his 20s, in his 30s, in one segment. He didn't have a bird's eye view of what was happening on all the fronts in the war. He just gave you, it's not that what he said was a lie, but his perspective. So you need to know this and listen to everybody with an open mind and ask yourself objectively without trying to defend any position or validate anything that you actually know, really what happened. This is how at some point, I began to approach my history. I said, you know what, I don't care who is at food. I just want to know what happened. And I also began to humanize everybody. Look, these guys my dad was in his 20s. These guys were young. I'm in my 40s now. I can imagine in my 20s, I'm having to make these big decisions and all that. There's no way I'm going to get every call right. You know, the same with Awo or Zeke or Ojukwu or Gowon. They were just young people trying to make the best of a very difficult situation that they were thrown in. And the decisions they took may not have been the best for all time, all season. And it's for us, their children, their grandchildren, to look back and say, okay, here they got it right, but here they didn't have enough information. So the decision they made here was suboptimal. It's not a commentary on them. It's just they did the best with what they knew. But 40, 50 years later, with technology, I know more than they knew in 1960. I know more about sociology and anthropology and culture and people than they knew. So somebody who in the 50s thought that Igbo and Yoruba are two different races. Today I know that it's very likely that Igbo and Yoruba came from the same place, the same people. And there are similarities in their culture and in their language that indicates that these two tribes may have evolved from an earlier single tribe. This is information that they may not have had easily accessible in the 40s and 50s. So you have to read your history with an objective, not going in there to justify positions you already hold, but with an open mind. When we talk about January 15, to see that every death was a tragedy, that it was a deep tragedy for the North, the way the Sudowner was murdered. And we can't say, oh, I don't care about that. That's not part of my story. You have to see it and feel it. And you also have to get them to see that, look, stopping a pregnant woman on the road of Kaduna and killing her just because she's Igbo. It's a deep tragedy, and you have to empathize with that. So it's this exchange of empathy, exchange of stories, exchange of perspectives, so that we see that it was a human tragedy, caused in most part by ignorance, not knowing enough about the other person. But we have the advantage that they didn't have. We've had 50 years of living together. I've gotten to know you, my Yoruba brother. I've gotten to know you, my Hausa, in a way that Zeke and Awo and Ahmadu Bello didn't have the opportunity to get to know each other. We've slept on the same bunk. We've jumped in the same buses. We've hustled in the same places. So we know enough about each other to make better decisions about how we live together and how we move forward. And to understand that God put us here. No tribe in Nigeria migrated from anywhere. We are all indigenous to this geographical space. It was the Almighty Himself that made us neighbors. You can't change that. You can't drive the Fulani out of this is their home. You can't drive the Igbo out of here. This is our home. We are all indigenous to this West African geographical space. And therefore we must, the same way you talk about a pan-European identity, a pan-European culture and civilization, there is a pan-West African culture and civilization that we need to realize that we must live together. There is no multiple origin. All of us originated from here.
Can I go further on that great, great statement and say that actually we have a God-given duty to live together and live together well.
Yeah.
That is why we're here. You see, because people forget that. It's not just that you don't have a choice. The Creator put you here.
Yeah.
It all belongs to all of us because He put you here.
Yeah.
And your duty here on earth is to maximize every resource He has given.
Absolutely.
I personally believe that the day we go, that may well be the question of the Almighty. He is neither male nor female.
Yeah.
What have you done
with what I gave you? You know, what have you done with what I gave you?
Stay with us. We'll be back in the last bit of this amazing discussion when we will turn to Dike again and say, so what does that mean, given our present dispensation, given our present political situation? Stay with us. We'll be back. Thank you for being with us. We're back again. It's been amazing. It's been truly, truly amazing. Words Dike has discussed. Every bit of the word and the thoughts that came out of his mind and his mouth have been deep and rich. This is a program many of you, I promise you, will have cause to replay over and over again and think about and reflect on. But Dike, let us zero in, because I think we're at this present time in Nigeria, we may have an unprecedented opportunity to make things right. We have a very important election coming up next year. It is our God-given opportunity to change things for the good. As we preach these ideals, which I say they're not ideals, they're the reality which we haven't claimed sufficiently. How should we translate those things you've talked about? A relearning of history, empathy, share understanding that our differences are less than our commonalities. How do we translate it into what we do in terms of the leadership we're in the process of choosing? How should it influence? What is it? First of all, tell us what you think should be the right characteristics for the leader we choose next year. And how do we make that happen in the rights we exercise as voters, as citizens? Those two major things. Leadership, what should be the profile? And how do we, the citizens, who form the majority, exercise our citizenship rights properly?
I've always said that Nigeria can only be safe in the hands of a Nigerian. So that's the first criteria, that your leader must see himself or herself as a Nigerian, must have the capacity to carry us all in his or her heart. There is no bias or favoritism with regard to any ethno-religious group. That's the first thing, so that you can truly define and be faithful to a national interest based on justice to all, fairness to all, regardless of whose ox is God, who is lifted or who is pushed down, but that there is justice for all. And it's only in Nigeria, and only a real Nigerian, a true Nigerian, that can be that way with regard to this country called Nigeria. So that's the first thing. They must have somebody who is truly sees themselves and considers themselves a Nigerian. Number two, you must have someone who is, how do I put this? Who is able to use public funds for the public good. The greatest problem, or one of the greatest problems next to tribalism, is the fact that people use public funds to build personal networks, to build personal political networks, to service networks of loyalty. And it creates a chain reaction because everybody comes and is using money that should go to roads and hospitals is being used to buy loyalty ahead of the next election. So you need to have somebody who will be faithful with public funds and allow public funds to go towards the creation of public good. And for that to happen, it has to be somebody whose followership, who is followed, not for the personal pecuniary advantage that followers can get from that person. So it's not just a change in leadership, you need a change in followership. So we need people that inspire us to follow them for their ideology, for their values, for what they can do for the community, not what they can do for me as a person. If you don't have a leader that can transform the followers, then these patterns of behavior will only repeat themselves. So for me, those are three key things that I watch out for. Somebody that considers themselves a Nigerian. Somebody in whom public funds are safe. You can trust that they will go to what they're supposed to do. And then somebody who is followed, not for the money advantage that can be gained personally from the person, but because you believe in that person's values and their vision for society. Because that makes the relationship between leader and follower ideological, as opposed to pecuniary and selfish. So today, when somebody says, oh, I'm a big politician, what it normally means is that they've bought the loyalty of everybody. Everybody owes them in one way or the other.
Yeah.
Either you've given money or you've put this one in position, you made this one. So how can I take the opinion of somebody? If you're loyal to someone for these reasons, you're already biased. Because you'll not be able to call them out when they go wrong, because you owe them. So we need to follow people that we don't owe. There's a statement in the Bible where Paul says, follow me as I follow Christ. And he gives you the benchmark. That means that if he stops following Christ, you're free to stop following him. So you're not following him, you're following an ideal that he happens to represent. And the moment he stops representing that ideal, the bond is broken. There's nothing personal about it. We need that relationship between leader and follower. Follow me for my prudence. Follow me for my commitment to the national interest. Follow me for my visions for my country. Follow me for my track record. And the moment I break with that vision, then you start following me. There's nothing personal about it. It's not that, oh, I owe you because you paid my mother's hospital bill. I owe you because you trained me in school. I owe you because you are the one that made me a great politician. In those cases, then, when I stop following you, to be like disloyalty. But who are we loyal to? Patriotism is loyalty to the nation, not to the government or to any of its officials, to the nation, first of all. So we need that shift in the mentality of followers. And it is a leader that will inspire that shift in the mentality of followers. So leaders that reinforce existing habits or follow me for what I can do for you as a person, that's not a leader to follow. We already know where that will lead us. That's where we're coming from. We're trying to go to the future. So for me, those three things, that you are a Nigerian and you see yourself as a Nigerian and you are comfortable with people from every part of this country, public funds are safe in your hands and will not go towards creating a private political army for yourself, but will go towards public goods. And three, that you inspire people to follow you because of your values and your vision.
Beautiful. I don't even need to recap that. But the last few minutes we have, Dike, let me ask you, because the vast majority of us are indeed the followers, what should we, the followers, do in the next few months to make sure we're good followers so that we begin our journey of greatness?
Rise above self. Remove self-interest. Forget about what you're going to get personally as a person or as a group, and think about what is best for the nation, for all of us. I'm a father with 4 children. Think about, for those of us who have children, think about your children. What kind of country do you want to live for your children? Think about what candidate best represents my values. My values, not my ethnicity, not my religion, not who is closest to me, not who do I have access to. Which one closely represents my values, comes closer to representing my values about how a society should be run, about how a leader should be in a society. And have the strength of your conviction, even if it runs against settled ethno-regional patterns. Have the strength of your conviction to, as an individual, say, this thing is more consistent with my values, and therefore I'm going to follow it, even if it makes me the minority in my immediate environment. So we need to be proactive as followers. We need to be principled and value-oriented as followers. We keep putting the blame on leaders in Nigeria, but I've moved past that. I realize that the real problem is the Nigerian people and their mentality, because leaders come from the people. It is us that keep reproducing and empowering these leaders because of how we think. If you change how you think, if you say, look, I'm not interested in a contract. I'm not interested in being anybody's PA or being appointed to any government position. I am not interested. All I want is good roads. All I want is functional hospitals. All I want is good education. All I want is security. Even if I don't benefit from it personally, but I want to see that environment being created where all Nigerians are being lifted up. Once you make that your desire, the common good, you will free yourself from the propensities and the habits that have ensured that Nigeria has stayed down. Once you can tell yourself, even as an individual, and it's a very hard thing, the demons are in all of us. Many people come out saying one Nigeria with their mouth, but really they are rooting for Ali Igbo. They are rooting for Hausa people. They are rooting for Fulani people. They are rooting for Yoruba people. But they'll be saying one Nigeria with their mouth. But if within you, you actually get to the point where you say, you know what? An Hausa child is as deserving of education as an Igbo child. The hunger of somebody in Maiduguri I can't eat is not, why should I care more about the one in Onitsha than the one in Maiduguri? Once you start seeing the whole country as yours and all its people as your people, and start wanting what is good for all of them, you will see the way clearly to where we should go.
I don't need to ask Dike for any further closing words. I will reluctantly end this amazing discussion on one of his last words: the common good. This is the homework. This is the task before each and every one of us that are citizens of this country. We must make a personal and deep commitment that as we move forward, whatever the costs, we will only cast our vote. First of all, we must try and vote. This is one time when everybody must try. But in voting for that person that we genuinely believe and see will work for the common good. May the good Lord help us all to do so. We thank you. Do join us next week as we talk to yet another amazing, inspirational Nigerian. See you next week. Bye-bye.